Hello, ECED 2360 students. I hope everyone has had a good last couple of weeks. So, we are kind of getting down to the wire here. We have just a few weeks left. So, as you can see, we are beginning work in our very last module, Module 7. So, Module 7 is really talking about the role that you play in an early childhood setting. So, what is your role as a teacher? And what we think about is we look at what your responsibility abilities are as an early childhood educator. We look at exploring what are some key characteristics of an effective teacher and really looking at what kind of resources are there and practices to help you navigate through this early childhood um, programs that you work in. So that's going to really be the overarching view that you're going to see in Module 7. You will again have two lessons. So this actually will go a little bit longer than 2 weeks, right about at 2 weeks, but maybe a little bit longer because we do have the holiday coming in there. But another thing that I want us to make note of is that you will also be finishing your work on your inclusive practices field work. So in addition to those 12 hours of observations, you also had some written aspects for the fieldwork assignments. So that will be something that you will be completing as well. So just looking a little bit further, um, we did again give you some of our objectives for this module, like what we're going to be focusing on. So you need to be able to identify recommended practices and essential elements for inclusive early childhood programs. We need to understand the causes and classification and characteristics of developmental disabilities, and then know how to collaborate effectively with multidisciplinary team to design an inclusive educational program that integrates parents, schools, and community resources. So these are really our course outcomes. Well, how do we get there? We get there with these module objectives. Again, focus on the key characteristics of effective teachers. So you're going to identify what those are, specifically focusing on inclusive programs for young children. You're going to be able to discuss the current issues and challenges facing the field of early childhood education. And then lastly, identify professional organizations and maybe potential career paths within early childhood and special education. So I gave you some guided questions here that will help you for each lesson, that will help you as you're reading and going through the module lessons. You're going to be reading out of chapter 11, which is called Characteristics of Effective Teachers, and this is going to be in your Exceptional Child textbook. I also gave you a link for DEC, and this is really fun because this is just like a pop quiz and links, and it gives you a little bit more insight into an effective teacher in early childhood programs. So I would take advantage of taking that as well. You do have your vocabulary from Module 7. These again you will see within your chapter in your textbook, but also you will see them in the module lessons themselves. So breaking it down a little bit further, when we're looking at lesson 7.1, we're really going to focus on those characteristics, excuse me, of effective teacher, what your role is. And then when we're looking at inclusive classrooms, how can we make it a good learning experience for all of our children? And then in lesson 7.2, we're going to look a little bit at some of our populations. So some of our demographics, like young children that may be remote, or looking at homeless populations, looking at professional organizations or resources that might help us. How do we become advocates for young children in inclusive classrooms? So these are issues that we see um, emerging in early childhood or trending in early childhood right now. Now, as far as your assessments, you last week we had a lot going on, the last module. So the last 2 weeks you had to do your behavior plan, you had an adapt a lesson. So this one is really going to give you a discussion about what you've learned within these 7 modules. So this one is really going to highlight everything that you've learned. Now, I do give you quite a bit of time to do this. So this is going to be due after Thanksgiving. So you'll see it's due by the last date of class when it ends. And I really, again, want you to focus back on all the modules and things that you've taken away. And it could even have come from your observation time in your inclusive practice fieldwork. The reason I didn't give you a lot here is because I wanted you to see the main focus that we have in Module 7, aside from our 2 lessons, and that's going to be your inclusive practices fieldwork. So you don't have a quiz, you just have that discussion board, but you do have to complete and submit your inclusive practices fieldwork. Now remember, the field work included your 12 hours of observation, and within that observation time of 12 hours, you were supposed to observe using that QIPC checklist and complete that, but you were also going to interview your teacher. And with those 2 components, you were going to do the rest of the written assignments that go along with the 12 hours. So I know that's a lot. I wanted us to really focus on the inclusive practices, field work, and completing your hours and completing those written components. So just make sure that you're aware that that will close the Dropbox on November 23rd at 11:59. So you do have some time to get that done. For those of us that had gotten a later start, you can email me because I know that you didn't have your required documentation, and I have a couple people that still have not been placed, which is a little concerning. So I have reached out to you otherwise. But if you have already been working in your 12 hours, don't forget that your due date is November 23rd. So that will be what your focus is. I will send another video out after that. That'll be around the week of Thanksgiving, and we will talk about wrapping up and the closing activities for this course. All right, I hope everyone has a great couple of weeks. And always, if you have questions about your inclusive practices fieldwork or your placement of getting the green light or documentation, please feel free to reach out. But if you are one that still hasn't been given the green light, it is imperative that you get those documents in as soon as possible so you can be given the green light because you need to go ahead and get those 12 hours in so you can complete your assignment. All right, until next time, take care.